Good morning, and welcome to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I am located at 1563 Main Street in Peckville, and I am here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. on these stations to bring landowners valuable information that you need regarding natural gas development here in Pennsylvania. At the Clark Law Firm, my focus is solely on landowner representation. I represent landowners for gas leases, water line, pipeline agreements, royalty issues, and I'm going to talk about some royalty issues today. I'm going to go back. We're going to talk about some royalty terms. We're going to clue some people into some of these critical issues. And also, I'm still doing more leases across Pennsylvania, and royalty issues are always a very, very important and primary topic that we talk about when I'm representing clients who are doing ongoing lease negotiations. And obviously, if you're a landowner who's receiving royalties, you certainly know that royalties, deductions, post-production costs are very big issues. So I'm going to talk about some sample provisions. I'm going to talk about some areas where there's some weaknesses and problems, and I think this is going to be very helpful, not only if you're an individual who's engaged in negotiations for oil and gas lease or an oil and gas lease at the present time, or you're curious about your language, where do you fit in, what's going on there. Also, at the Clark Law Firm, I represent landowners. I'm doing more and more estate planning as clients are getting royalties and transitioning into the royalty phase. Also doing, obviously, a lot of royalty work, a lot of issues. Things really do evolve. And a lot of clients now, I have a lot of clients where there's unitization issues, amendment and modifications of their oil and gas leases. A lot of tricky little hidden issues there, and one case had come up just this past week. Very excited about this one, where a client was asked by a company to sign this document to keep their lease alive, which we found out. Of course, this wasn't really explained to the landowner by the company, but we found out that actually their lease had expired and they were in this production unit. Well, sometimes that can be a very bad thing, because if you don't have a lease and you're in a production unit, well, it's very possible, as long as a well is not drilled underneath you, that you're one of these donut holes within this production unit. So very important then that most people are going to want to have a lease, and they're going to want to be involved in this production unit because they're going to obtain royalties based upon the production of gas from that unit. So in many cases, when you're given an amendment or modification, or you're given an extension to your existing oil and gas lease, you need to really seriously consider that and understand all the issues, because many times, you do not want to see your lease expired. However, I say it all the time, and I'll continue to say it, there's no specific advice for every specific person. So you need to look at your situation. So although in the majority of cases that I review and I consult on, it does make sense to sign an extension and modification, but sometimes we can get more money, we can get better terms, we can get more assurances of production. So you want to look at all those things, but the threshold question is this something that I should even be entertaining and looking to enter into for my property? So in a lot of cases, yes, it makes sense to assign extensions and modifications. And, a little sidebar here. One of the things that I do, I've probably done 3 or 4 in the last couple of weeks, landowners will get these extensions or modifications. And one of the services I do is I do a consultation with them to try to guide them, help them understand the issues and what they should be thinking about. And typically, it's 2 hours of maximum time, half an hour to an hour to get ready, an hour conference. We go over everything and say, okay, here's what the issues are. Here's what the benefits are. Here's what the detriments are. And let me answer your questions and help guide you through the decision-making process. It's always your decision, but let me help guide you. And now I'll tell you, sometimes it's abundantly clear what that decision should be. Other times it can be much more tricky. So going back again. So you have this oil and gas lease extension or modification, amendment. Well, you need to understand, what does this mean? Why may I want to do it? Just because you're given it by the company doesn't mean you should immediately run away or say, okay, I'm going to ask for a ton more money, because in many cases, and in most cases, you're not going to get that. However, you need to understand your situation. Now, going back to what started my little story here. So I had a client who calls me. I'd done pipeline work before in the past. I hadn't done their original lease negotiations years ago, but I did do their pipeline work and some other work for them. So they call me and say, hey, we got this call from the company and they want us to sign this document so our lease continues and we're going to start getting royalties and this is going to be a great thing. And the company said, we're going to be really happy, and they want to make sure that we're getting royalties right from the beginning, and they're doing a big favor for us, and here's these documents. Well, let me say, anytime, and this person was very aware of this, that the company is out there saying that they're going to do you some great favor, you need to look into it. You need to say, okay, why is this company out here looking to do me such a great favor? Because there are many, many, many people out there where the companies aren't doing them favors. So why does the company want to do me a favor? Are they just truly a nice company and they're looking to help me out? Well, maybe that is the case. But let's say in this case, we do some more digging and we find out that, yes, indeed, the lease terminated. That the company did not comply with all the terms of the lease, and that lease terminated. So they're in a proposed production unit, but their lease is terminated. So initially we say, okay, well, let's assess this because we do want to make sure that you're going to be getting royalties, and maybe you do want to sign this document that says, okay, we're going to renew your lease, or we're going to keep your lease active. However, remember this fundamental rule. A fundamental rule, very basic rule that everybody must know in Pennsylvania is if you do not have a lease, with the company cannot drill underneath of your property. No lease, no drill. However, if you don't have a lease, you can be in a unit and the company can drill on neighboring parcels or in your area, but as long as they're not underneath you, they can drill around you and you cannot have a lease. So let's just say you have a 50-acre parcel. You could be anywhere within a production unit as long as the well bore is not going underneath or intersects below your property. Well, you can be unleased and you're still geographically located within this production unit, but you don't have a lease. Maybe you didn't want to sign a lease. Maybe the company didn't offer you a lease, but typically we get people who didn't sign for whatever reason, and now the company drills on neighboring parcels, not underneath the unleased parcel because they can't do that, okay? So they drill around, and here this landowner now says, well, geez, everything's occurring the exact same around me. I don't have a lease. You know what? I think I do want to have a lease, so at least I can get the royalties. And that makes sense. And sometimes you can do that, but sometimes the companies say, well, in a lot of cases, you had your opportunity. You didn't enter into a lease when we offered you a lease. So therefore, we're not offering you a lease now. We're not drilling underneath you. We don't plan to drill underneath you. So therefore, we're just going to go ahead and pass. So now you're sitting there unleased within a production unit and everybody else within that production unit. So let's say there's 800 acres of property in there. All those people are getting royalties, but you are not, because you do not have a gas lease. So because you don't have a gas lease and you're not getting royalties, the restriction for the company is they can't drill under your property if you are not under a gas lease, and they have the rights to drill under that gas lease. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. Been doing the show since August 2010, and you can go to pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com. Check it out for great information, pagasleaseattorney.com. You miss any of today's show, you got to leave early, you didn't catch the beginning, or any of the other shows over this past year, go to pagasleaseattorney.com. We have them archived. We'll have this show up tomorrow morning, Monday morning. You can go check it out as well. Again, pagasleaseattorney.com. And if you need to contact me directly, representation, you can always reach me at 570-307-0702, 570-307-0702. 0702. You can also contact us through the website at pagasleaseattorney.com. Okay, so back to this. Very, very important stuff. And I'm going to get to royalties, but I got sidetracked here. But this is exciting stuff for me. I do a lot of work that I find very exciting, but then sometimes you get these cases or you get these files which are kind of extra exciting. So, landowner, prior client, represented for pipelines and some other issues, comes to me and says, gas company contacted me. They want to renew my lease or revive my lease because it has expired. Or they say it expired, and I'm in a production unit, and they're going to start paying out royalties, and this company said, hey, we want to be good guys, we want to make sure you're getting royalties, and right now, because you don't have a lease, we can't pay you royalties, so here, hurry up and go ahead and sign this. Well, landowner says, sounds a little suspicious. Company's being awfully nice, and I know that they have a history of not being so nice at times, so let me look at this. So, landowner calls, sends me the information, and say, okay, let's go ahead and investigate this. So, if we look at this situation, what I'm going to do is, well, as I look at this situation, I'm going to look at, okay, have wells been drilled? How many wells are drilled? Where are the wells located? And hopefully everyone's following. A big issue is going to be, is a well located or drilled already that goes under this person's property? So, is there a well under this person's property at the present time? Why is that so important? Back to my fundamental rule that everybody must know, or everybody should know. If you're not leased, a company cannot drill underneath your property. No lease, can't drill underneath you. Can drill around you, but not underneath you. So we're looking at this and we say, okay, number one, do we agree that this lease is expired? And if we do or not, either way, we're still going to step two. Is there any wells, or are there any wells drilled under this person's parcel? Now, in this particular case, it looks like there is. So, what does that mean? Well, that's a potential major problem for the gas company. You cannot drill under a parcel that does not have a lease. If you do not have rights under a lease, you can't drill under that parcel. And if you did, in my opinion, and I'm pretty sure I'm right on this, is that is a trespass. A trespass. So now the question becomes, how do we handle that? And I'm not going to go too deep into all the details of this, but what I'm going to say is hopefully this gives you an idea of some of the types of issues that we need to look at and investigate. If a company, let's say, you see all the time where companies say it costs like $5 to $7 million to drill a well. Well, you drill a well, you drill it under a parcel that you're not allowed to be under, and that person says, hey, I object, you're not allowed to be under there. One of the things that's certainly very possible or probable if an agreement can't be reached is that well cannot be used to produce gas. So that company may have just blown $5 to $7 million in expenses to drill this well. On top of that, the company also has lost the potential profits from that well that they spent the $5 to $7 million to drill, because the landowner can potentially shut this thing down because it goes underneath their property. Now it gets even more detailed. Where is the property located? So if it is a 6,000 foot long well bore and this client's or landowner's property is all the way at 5,900 feet, well, yeah, maybe the company just shuts it off shorter there, and then we get into a battle as to what the damages are. However, what if it's a 6,000 foot horizontal well bore and the landowner's parcel is in the first 1,000 feet? Well, that's going to be a big problem for the company. So in this particular case, and time will tell how this whole thing plays out, but by looking and investigating and finding out what this background situation was, I believe ultimately this is going to be a significant benefit to the landowner. Time will tell, but that's what I think is going to happen. So we need to look at these things. This can be significant. Think if this person has originally a 12.5% royalty, maybe we can reach an agreement which is with a higher royalty percentage. Maybe there would be some sort of settlement payment. Who knows? We'll see. But the point is, we got to look at these things. We got to investigate amendments, modifications. Anytime a company wants you to sign a document, you need to get it to somebody who knows how to evaluate and look at it. I do these. This isn't a commercial. I do this all the time with all my clients. I say, listen, anytime a company wants you to sign something, send it to me. Let's look at it and say, hey, yeah, look, I think you're going to need some help with this. Here's the reason why. Or, hey, look, not really a big deal. Here's what it's about. Don't think you need legal representation. Don't need to incur expenses. But maybe you do. Here's the reasons why. So we have that discussion. I'm way over here. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. Right back after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. Again, I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9. You can always contact me directly, 570-307-0702. That's 570-307-0702. I represent Pennsylvania landowners, only landowners, not gas companies, not pipeline companies, no companies, only landowners and the owners of oil, gas, mineral rights. So you can always contact me, 570-307-0702. Learn more about me, learn more about the Clark Law Firm. Most importantly, learn more about natural gas development. Go check out pagasleaseattorney.com. We've renovated the sites. If you haven't been there in a while, check out pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com. Continuing to work on pipelineattorney.com, but we're very blessed, we're very fortunate, we're very busy. So working on the websites at every free time I can on the pipeline site, but thankfully we have a lot of other things going on, and that's what I want to talk to you guys more about here today. So, I'm going to talk about royalty issues and probably maybe the end of this segment and certainly the last two, but I want to talk more about this topic. And, as I do the radio show, I find certain qualities and characteristics that sometimes I guess my wife complains about. But those being, I seem to maybe jump around a little bit. And, I came into the show, I got these papers in front of me, I want to talk about royalties. But then it strikes me as I'm talking here in the first segment about this situation. And, I often say, I'm up here, I'm preaching. I feel like I'm preaching at times. But I'm doing it because I think it's so important. I really believe it's so important, and I've seen it play out, and I know that landowners are missing many opportunities every day. It's happening out there. So as part of kind of my therapy, as I watch this occur, or I can't help or I'm not involved, I want to get this information out there. So when you're approached for an amendment and modification or an extension of your gas lease, landowners are making mistakes. Attorneys advising landowners are making mistakes. You can't just go to the internet and get answers for these issues. You need to understand deeper. You need to have a deeper understanding of production, unitization, how do companies do these things, how do they leverage, what is the past conduct of this company and other companies in this situation. Some are going to be more willing to work with you, others are not. So we have a base of knowledge that you can operate off of. But if you do not know that, well, you obviously can't pull from that information to make a better decision. And if your attorney doesn't know that, well, he or she can't help you in that more detailed way either. So it's important. If you have amendment, modification, extension, whether it's me or somebody else, you need to get some assistance from somebody who understands these issues in a deeper way. You really need to do it. Because what's happening is some landowners are not signing amendments and modifications or extensions, and it's coming back to hurt them, and to hurt them very badly, where literally they can be cut out of production and not see production and not see future royalties because they made a bad decision. And had they had the right information, they would have made the right decision. They wouldn't have made that same decision. And once you make a decision and you're out, it's going to be very difficult and very well maybe impossible, and certainly we've seen it, to be impossible to get back in. So you have this opportunity. It is a major decision that you need to make, and you need to have the right information. And you can't always rely on the landman who works for the company. You can't do that. You need to get some good information by somebody who knows, and not your neighbor. Not some other guy who, he got a really good gas lease. Well, you know how he got a good gas lease? There's a good chance he might have just got lucky. So you need to make sure you're getting quality information, because these are very important decisions. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. We'll have this show and all the other shows over the past year. They're up and available at pagasleaseattorney.com. This show will be up at pagasleaseattorney.com tomorrow, Monday morning. So, before I leave this subject, so I want to just finish up and say, if you have an amendment, a modification, or an extension, you need to look at this. You need to understand your lease. You need to understand these issues. You need to get some assistance, because a wrong decision could end up having you being cut out of future production and future royalties. You can't make that mistake, but at the same time, you don't want to just go sign these things. In the case that I talked about before, it looks like a company has drilled under a property that is not leased. That's a problem. Remember, companies can't drill under parcels that are not leased. And in fact, over the last 2 weeks, I became aware of 2 of these situations. 2 of them. One where a company goes to somebody and says, hey, we want to give you this lease. Here you go. We want to do you a favor. Here's this lease, and it's for a decent amount of money. Again, flags and bells should be going off. Let me check into this. Well, it appears that maybe a well is underneath that property already. That's a problem. So you can imagine that there's a strong opportunity that maybe that person, because a well is underneath them, can negotiate a lease with far better terms, because there's what I would believe is a trespass that's already occurred. There's a lot of money involved. I'm going to believe that companies probably don't want to have it out there that, hey, yeah, we screwed up and drilled somewhere where we shouldn't have. So you need to look at those, because those things can be a tremendous windfall potentially for the landowner. There's a lot more details. I'm going to do shows and shows of this. Remember how I said earlier, it depends on where your parcel is. If your parcel is close to where the well was drilled, to the front part, close to the actual rig where they've drilled under you and they're not supposed to be there, that's going to be a much bigger problem for the company than if they have a 6,000 foot horizontal well and your properties are located in the last 100 feet or 500 feet, whatever number we want to use. So we want to look at that. Then you want to look at, if we're going to fight this, how do we do this? Do we just want to jump into litigation? Do we want to try to work something out? What may be the potential damages just because they drilled there? What may I be entitled to? So all of those things come into play, and they're very detailed, and there's a lot more than what we're going to talk about here today. But there's a lot of discussions and factors to be considered there. So you need to look at these things. Now also, with the amendments and modifications and extensions, just recently had one where we were able to obtain a nice sum of money for the client to agree to what was being requested. Can't always get that. In most cases you can't, but some cases you can. So which is your case? And it's one of these things where you may have heard me talk before. People often, and I understand this, they get concerned, and you don't want to spend money on legal fees or anything if it's not going to benefit you or it's not going to help you. Well, what I found is we have hardly any. I can't even think of I can't think of the last time that I had somebody complain to me. I really can't. So we have just say a consultation for an amendment and modification or ratification. So we look at that, we talk about the issues, and then the person leaves that consultation saying, hey, okay, now I really understand these issues. This has been very helpful. I've heard these exact words, and it's clear to me now this is what I'm going to do, and I can sleep at night knowing that I've understood these issues. Then there's other times where we find something and we say, hey, you actually have some leverage here. Here's what your leverage is. Let's talk about options and how you may want to use this. Again, it's ultimately up to a person. But whether it's me or somebody else, but about legal fees, one of the things I say to people is, look, if there's nothing that can be done for you, if it's just going to be a consultation, explanation, talking through these issues and framing everything as to what the best plan is, well, that's not going to take a lot of time. So you're not going to get hit with some big legal bill that you're afraid of. What's going to happen, though, is if you have a situation where, we look at this, we do the consultation, do this background work, and find out, hey, looks like there's a well under your property that's not supposed to be there. Then we're going to have to spend some more time on that. But as a result of that more time that's being spent, we can fully expect a significant benefit for you in the end. So, generally speaking, the more time that is spent on any file, the better result that the landowner is going to receive, or the more work that is necessary to finalize a fair and appropriate agreement. No attorney should be looking to manufacture work here. You're looking to say, okay, hey, here's what you have. This is pretty simple. Let's go ahead. I think you can wrap this up. Here's the issues. Or, wait a second, there's something deeper here. And here's some things that you might want to do, which usually are going to result in more compensation, better terms. Sometimes, it's just working on the terms. But in having experience in dealing with these issues all the time, we're able to identify them, represent people efficiently, and get you to the point where you need to be. And if more time is involved, well, it's usually going to have a significant benefit to you. And I just had that recently. Just did about 4 different pipeline agreements with the company, with one of the clients. And there's been a lot of time spent in this and leverage and negotiation and all these different points. But the end result is, in this case, it looks like they're going to get over $1 million. And the legal fees in that are going to be relatively speaking, are going to be very small. The benefit is going to be enormous. So that's one example. And of course, when people use examples, they're going to tend to use, and I will too, some more extreme examples. But many times, if you're spending more time in negotiation of money, negotiation of terms, well, that means you're going to have a better deal. You're going to have maybe some more time and more fees because there's more time involved, but in virtually every single case I've ever worked on, we've made a determination that, hey, and including the clients, that time and money was very well spent because it resulted in benefits. Where if you get an agreement, comes in, you say, look, there's really not much I can do. I had one just this past week, client with a gas lease with the company I deal with regularly. Say, look, here's what we're going to do. Here's what the plan is. Let me explain to you. I'm not going to manufacture work here. I know what we can do. I know what we can't do. Let's get in and out. We'll get you the best agreement we can. We'll do it efficiently. Here's other terms that we could ask for that I don't think are going to be granted. Here's terms that there's no sense asking for. They're never going to be granted. But let's work this thing through quickly. You don't need me to cheerlead you and say, oh, we should get this and we should do that. And you need to ask for this and we'll do this and we'll do that. And then I act surprised, and I don't do that. But I would act surprised, or lawyer act surprised. Well, geez, I can't believe they didn't do that, or I can't believe they denied this. Well, no, you should know they denied this. You should know what those markets are. So let's get in and out. Let's talk to you about what you have and what you don't have. Is this normal for this area? Is this normal for the market at this time and these conditions? Let's do it efficiently, get you the best agreement we can, explain to you that process, and get you in and out. Let's not act like we're negotiating world peace and give you a 20-hour bill for something that never got any better, when in reality, you should have known as the attorney that there's only so much you can do. Let's do the best we can. Let's explain the limitations to the client, landowner, why you can't do more, what you've done in the past, where you are now, and where the market is and what the region is, and get in and out and make sure the client understands everything. We've been very successful People have been very appreciative, and that's the way to do it, in my opinion. That's the way to do it. So that's what your attorney, well, that's the way I do it, but I believe that your attorney should be working that way. So if you have an attorney, or if you're contacting an attorney, ask those questions. Look at those issues. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. I'm going to be back again after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm, here every Sunday, every single Sunday, 8 to 9 a.m. on these stations. Also, PAGasLeaseAttorney.com, PipelineAttorney.com. Go to the sites for information, whether you need representation or not. PAGasLeaseAttorney.com, PipelineAttorney.com. At the PAGasLeaseAttorney.com site, we have the radio shows up archived. Been doing the show since August of 2010. Can't wait to hit the 5-year anniversary. Probably more than anything, just because I can say then I've been doing it for 5 years. So anyway, all right. So leaving the last segment where I never planned on talking anywhere near that much, or even talking today about amendments, modifications, and extensions, or the need for a good attorney, I felt that it is necessary because just this past week, 2 major cases and opportunities for landowners. And if they just simply signed, I have a feeling they're going to make out a whole lot better than just simply signing. And why would they have simply signed? Because the landman who works for the company told them that the company was doing you this big favor. So please be careful. Be careful of company favors. And if we look at it and we say, well, you know what? We're actually doing you a favor here. Well, that's great. Go ahead and do it. But let's make sure that we're not taking the company's word for doing you a favor. All right. Switching gears here, I want to talk about deductions, and I haven't talked about deductions in a while. I was giving people breaks. Deductions, what are deductions? Many people are getting royalties, and you're seeing in your royalty check what are commonly referred to as deductions. And deductions are they're the subtraction from your royalty of certain post-production costs. So what you have is you'll see on your royalty check, there'll be a price of gas where gas was sold. And I always just use this example, and I continue to use it, and I will. And I know it may be high, but we'll say that gas is sold. You see a royalty check, it's sold at $4 per MCF, or we'll call it a gas unit. So it's sold at $4. Well, as a royalty owner, let's say you have 15% royalty. Well, you would like to get 15% royalty of the sell price, and that's it. You want to get that sell price. But what happens is usually that gas that is sold for $4, usually, not always, but usually is sold at what they call an interconnect point, or the interstate pipeline, meaning the point at time where the gas from your well is transported from your well along with other gas in that area through a pipeline system, and it ultimately hits an interstate pipeline. It's one of these big pipelines that travels from state to state. So often gas is sold there. In my example, we're saying it was sold there at $4 per unit or per MCF. Now, the gas doesn't just appear there. It has to be transported, and they call it gathering the gas from the various wells, transporting it through pipeline systems to get it to this interstate pipeline or the interconnect point. It may also need to be compressed to increase the pressure to transport the gas. So what'll happen is the landowner will see, well, my gas was sold at $4, and they'll see what that value would be if they didn't have any deductions taken and they just received $4 or royalties on $4 gas. Well, there's columns, and they list them as what deducts or deductions, and the little codes there. And you'll see a code that maybe it has a T for transportation or a G for gathering. Sometimes it may be a number, maybe 9 equals gathering and 7 equals transportation. But anyway, you'll see a code, and it will say that there's deductions being subtracted from your royalty, and it'll list those amounts of deductions by way of a money figure. So as an example, say in a given month, your royalty, if you were paid $4 per MCF, if you receive royalty on $4 gas, you would get, in this example, say $1,000 that given month in royalties. But underneath that, there'll be a line item that'll say, we'll just make it transportation. And transportation says $250 minus $250, because for that $1,000 of gas that we sold, it cost us $250 as a company to transport your gas from the wellhead to the interstate pipeline or the point of sale in our example. Well, that's not the only deduction you see. You also see a gathering deduction for a smaller pipeline system, we'll say. So now maybe that's going to be $100. So you have your $1,000 minus $250 for transportation, minus $100 for gathering, and let's just say that we're going to throw in a transportation deduction of $50, or I'm sorry, a compression deduction for compression. So instead of receiving the $1,000, you have a lease that allows for deductions to be taken. So instead of your $1,000, you see, okay, I'm losing $250 for transportation, another $100 for gathering, so that's $350. Then another $50 for compression. Well, that's $400. So now I see in my check, if I had no deductions, I would get $1,000. But since I have deductions being taken, now I only get $400. Now, deductions vary. They do vary from area, from companies, and I could do show after show on all of those subjects. But those deductions are something, obviously, you'd much rather have the $1,000 than the $400 being subtracted for a total of $600. So instead of getting $1,000, you're only getting $600, and you're having $400 deducted. Now, again, those are going to vary, and these are just made-up numbers that illustrate this point. So as a landowner, what do you want to do? You want to have a gas lease that says no deductions. And many people know, and listeners know, that it's not always that clear. And in fact, you can have a lease that you believe means no deductions, and that I can also believe means no deductions, but the company can disagree. And if the company says, no, we interpret your language to allow us to take deductions, and therefore we're taking deductions, it comes to that whole possession is 9/10 of the law. Well, if they have your money and you think that money's your due, that's your money they're holding, well, what do you have to do? Well, you're going to have to go after it. And there's different things. Now, we have a lot of class actions that are going on out there, which means that the landowner doesn't necessarily need to go do anything specific if they're within the class action. But please, 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 I can't stress this enough. This is not individual advice by any means, in any way. I'm not telling you to contact or not contact anyone. I want to be very clear about that. I want to just kind of frame these issues and make sure that people are thinking about these things, because there's a lot of options that are available out there for the landowner. But my focus today and more of the discussion is, okay, well, obviously I'm in negotiating a lease. I don't want to have deductions taken. Well, what do I do about that? Now, again, first starting off, this isn't specific advice to say what you must do as a landowner. What I'm going to do is talk about some royalty provisions and show you and discuss where some problems are, maybe where some issues are very clear, but maybe some or other places where issues are not so clear. And my hope is that this will illustrate to you as a listener landowner that, hey, these issues can be pretty complicated. Some that I can maybe identify easily. Others, I need to make sure I'm getting some assistance, whether it's Doug Clark or somebody else. I stress it. Just get assistance, because most people do not understand these issues. The vast majority, in fact, I think very few do, even including the landmen. I think very few do. So it's so important that you, as the landowner, when you're considering a lease and you're looking at the language, that you understand this. Now, I want to stress too, you may never ever, no matter what you do, you can understand this. You can know more about royalty deduction and contract language than anyone on the planet. But that doesn't mean that the company will ever agree to a lease that's going to pay you no deductions. That doesn't mean that. That means that you know what you can do to try to guarantee that you will not have deductions, but that doesn't mean that the company's going to agree with it. So what we do see a lot is we see a company say, oh, we'll pay you royalties without deductions, or that's what the landman will tell you. We will pay you, the company will pay you royalties without deductions, but then they turn around and give you language that we know many companies take deductions with that exact language. And in fact, the company that you lease to may ultimately take deductions. They might even take deductions immediately from your first check. Also remember, you have that language in these leases. I refer to it all the time, what I call the landman free pass language, where it says if it's not contained in the lease, it doesn't count. Everything is in the four corners of this document, and whatever that landman told you is irrelevant. He or she has no power to contract other than what's in this document and written in these words. So what they say to you doesn't mean anything when you're coming into this battle as to what does this language mean. The only time that you can bring in outside verbal or oral information from a contract is going to be if there's ambiguity or problems, and that's very difficult to establish. So you need to be protected in black and white, and you need to understand just because that landman tells you, landowner, you're protected, that does not mean, I promise you, that does not mean that you're protected. You need to understand that. Landman works for company. I am Attorney Doug Clark. I'm going to cut this segment a little bit short so I have some more time in the last segment. I'm going to go through some royalty provisions. I'm going to go through some kind of sample regular provisions that clearly allow for deductions. And then I'm going to go through a couple provisions, and I could do this all day, but I'm going to go through a couple provisions that are going to show where the company is giving an impression that there's not going to be deductions. But then also, I'm going to show one which is a very strong provision, but even there, where a company might find a little loophole to get out. And that's a part of this too, is to identify the loopholes. I say this often, know where your lease is strong, know where it's weak, know where a company may be able to manipulate the language, and if you're comfortable with it and we can't change that language, you understand it and you make a decision whether to lease or not lease. And look, there's people out there that are leasing for 12.5% with deductions, 15% with deductions, because those are the best deals that they can get, and that's all that's available for them. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus here every Sunday from 8 to 9, and I'm going to be right back after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I'm here every Sunday, 8 to 9. Go to pagasleaseattorney.com, pagasleaseattorney.com. We'll have this show up Monday morning, so you miss any of that, you can hear other archive shows. Remember, here every Sunday from 8 to 9. You can always contact me directly at 570-307-0702, 570-307-0702. We are here for the landowner, Okay, jumping back to royalties. So I got a short segment. I'm going to teach you some buzzwords. I'm going to get you thinking. Nothing is specific advice for anyone. This is to get you thinking, to get you clued in, to understand some of these issues, and to know some of these buzzwords. Okay, regular leases. Companies offer landowners form leases. So if you're going to be getting an offer from any certain company, whether it be Shell, Chesapeake, Chief, Anadarko, we can go on and on, Southwestern, Cabot, they use a EQT, they use a form lease, the same lease that they give to everybody. Then you look to negotiate addendum or additional terms. The form lease that a company presents to you, I do not believe that I have ever seen a form lease that doesn't allow the company to take deductions for post-production costs. What we want to remember is, landowners, we do not want wellhead price. We do not want wellhead price. We want downstream sale price. We want that gas to be moved from the wellhead to a point of sale that is going to be closer to the ultimate consumer, and we want to get the sale price. You can't always get that. You can't always get that. In many cases today, you cannot get that. However, in some cases, you can. And the difference can be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and truly millions of dollars over time, depending on many variables and most important, the size of your parcel. So, okay, we want to try to make sure that we're getting royalties calculated at the highest possible price. We do not want the company to be able to reduce our royalties if we can help it. And maybe we can't, but maybe we can. Also, many people believe and are being told, yeah, you sign this lease, you're not going to have deductions. And in fact, some companies even have headings which say no deductions clause or something to that effect. So again, the landowner feels great about that. However, does that truly mean that you do not receive deductions in the future? And I will tell you, there's a company out there that's giving landowners offers that have language saying no deductions or no deduction clause. But I know of multiple companies and multiple very large companies that are major producers in Pennsylvania that if they end up holding that lease or if they were paying you royalties, they would be taking deductions. Also, a lot of very sneaky semantics going on here too. We have a case where with the wellhead, you have the point of sale, the interstate connect line, which I'm going to call the point of sale in most cases. However, and that's where the gas meets the interstate pipeline. However, gas is not always sold there. So sometimes it's transported to the interstate pipeline and it's not sold there. And then it's transported within the interstate pipeline to even further distance away. Most leases are not going to cover that subsequent transportation after the interstate pipeline. So you can have a lease, if it's written well and a company follows it, that says that you have no deductions from the well site until that gas hits the interstate pipeline. But if it's not sold there, usually it is, but if it's not, and then it's transported further to the point of sale, to a different point of sale, well, the company can take deductions there for that subsequent transportation, compression, or whatever occurs after the gas hits the interstate pipeline. And that's generally what we're targeting as a landowner. So you can see those deductions, but those aren't the deductions that we're really primarily fighting over. We're fighting about the deductions from the wellhead to that interstate pipeline. So you have to be careful when you're talking about deductions. Well, what are we exactly talking about? Now, another thing that companies do is they say, well, we're not actually taking deductions because we're giving you the wellhead price, and therefore there's no deductions from the wellhead price. A very common argument is by us moving it from the wellhead to this interstate pipeline, we're actually enhancing or getting you a better price, and that's not a deduction. It's an enhancement of the gas, and that's a very, very popular argument. So, okay, I want to jump into real quick some sample regular provisions that are in this form lease. Again, form leases offered by the company are almost always just going to give you wellhead price, and we want something better. So, because I'm running on time here, I'm going to just give one quick example. This one here says, to pay a royalty in amount equal to the current value at the wellhead when it's produced to 15%. And then it says, in no event shall the current market value be deemed to be in excess of the value actually received by lessee pursuant to a bona fide arm's length sale or transaction. So, okay, what's that mean? You're getting wellhead price. We like the bona fide arm's length transaction stuff. We like that. But you're getting wellhead price, meaning if they sell it for $4 at the interstate pipeline, they're going to deduct those costs to get it there. Transportation, compression, dehydration even, gathering, they're going to deduct those. Wellhead price. When you see wellhead, you need to know what that means. Another very common phrase that you'll see very often is revenue realized. Revenue realized. You got to be careful about that because, as a general rule, revenue realized means how much money did they ultimately make? So again, companies are going to say, well, we're factoring in deductions there. So if you're getting 15% on revenue realized and it cost us $1 to transport it to this point of sale, well, we didn't realize, in my example I keep using, if they sold it for $4, but it cost them $1 to get it there, they're going to say, well, we didn't realize $4 from our sale because it cost us $1 to get it there. So we actually only realized $3. So you get royalties on revenue realized, not $4, but revenue realized, and therefore we're going to pay you royalties on gas sold at $3. So that's another very common term or phrase or buzzwords that you'll see in leases. So when you see that, you need to understand, hey, I got to look at this more and I need to make sure I understand what it means. Now, some of these companies, sometimes I say, we can't do certain things. Sometimes we can still get market enhancement clause. We can get royalty provisions. Sometimes the company says absolutely not. Other times we can actually really kind of play around and negotiate some unique terms. There's some pockets across the state that we're able to do that. I'm going to finish here. I have one lease here, which I really I like this. I'm going to go through this. I think I have enough time. Okay, it's an addendum. It's a newer company. It's a bit smaller, but it's a legitimate company. So we have here in the addendum a provision called no post-production deductions. No post-production, meaning after the gas is produced, deductions. Okay, nice heading. Says the royalty paid to landowner on actual volumes of gas sold from the leased premises shall be free of all post-production cost. Period. Excellent. Liking it so far. As used in this lease, post-production cost means all costs and expenses lessee incurs between the wellhead and the point of sale. Okay, post-production costs from the wellhead to the point of sale. Very much liking this so far. Which include but not limited to treating, dehydrating, purification, processing, storing gas or both. Goes on, separating liquid hydrocarbons from gas. Goes on, and then I'm going to paraphrase some of these. Transporting oil, gas. Transporting, gas, including but not limited to transportation between the wellhead and any production or treating facilities, and transportation to the point of sale. All of these things are very, very good. Compression is also added in here. Metering, sales charges, commissions. It goes on. Any other expense of any kind or nature incurred in regard to the gas or the handling of the gas from the wellhead to the point of sale. I want to stress, this isn't specific advice on that term. This is not specific advice for anybody, but I'm going to tell you that's some really good language. I really like that language.